Washington is reeling from Senator Joe Manchin's decision not to support the president's social and climate spending bill after months of negotiation. The West Virginia Democrats' vote is critical to the passage of the bill in the 50-50 Senate, and Americans are left to wonder if the bill is now dead in the water. But leaders in the Democratic Party are still hopeful. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he intends to bring the bill up in the new year. He says he wants Senator Manchin to be held accountable with an official vote on the Senate floor. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris says passage of many policies in the bill remain critical.
I refuse to get caught up in what might be personal politics when the people who are waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning worried about how they're going to get by could care less about the politics of D.C.
So you don't feel betrayed?
No, I don't have any personal feelings about this. This is about let's get the job done and talk with families who say, I can't afford to do the basic things that I need to do as a responsible adult, like care for my children, care for my older parents, or afford to get life-saving medication like insulin. We have to extend it.
How do you do that without Senator Manchin?
You don't give up. That's how we do it.
Now I want to bring in congressional reporter for Politico, Marianne LeVine. Marianne, welcome. Vice President Kamala Harris says Democrats shouldn't give up at this point. Now, do you know whether there's a contingency plan or perhaps a plan to just push forward?
Right now, it looks like Democratic leaders are pushing forward despite Senator Manchin's concerns and statement this weekend that he would not support the current version of the social spending bill. It's not clear what plan, though, Democrats are pursuing, because Senator Manchin has made it very clear that he wants to only fund a smaller number of programs and wants to make that funding more permanent. So it's not clear right now whether Democrats have to go back to the drawing board and dramatically scale back their legislation, and even if they do that, whether or not that's enough to get Senator Manchin to support the bill in the end. But we're seeing every sign that Democrats are pushing forward. There were bipartisan meetings with the Senate parliamentarian yesterday on the legislation, and Schumer will have a caucus meeting tonight. So it looks like they're taking Manchin's word, but also trying to find some way to salvage the situation.
Now, Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is among the many Democratic lawmakers that are criticizing Manchin for his choice. Let's listen.
I think what Senator Manchin did yesterday represents such an egregious breach of the trust of the president. The idea that Joe Manchin says he can't explain this back home to his people is a farce.
Now, what does this mean? Why does Manchin continue to say that he can't explain this bill to his constituents?
Well, it's important to remember that Manchin has repeatedly expressed concern about inflation. That appears to be his biggest concern in terms of what the consequences would be of passing the social spending bill. Now, Democrats dispute that assertion, but he has repeatedly talked about inflation. And now it's also important to remember that Manchin is the only Democrat still in West Virginia who is elected to federal office. And so he's in a state that is trended red and that continues to trend red. And so for him, his calculation is likely that West Virginia voters may not support the social spending bill if they're looking at the price tag, and he's expressed concerns about inflation. It's clear that he's assuming that his voters, too, have those concerns.
Now, the assumption has been that his opposition has to do with coal and coal mining. America's largest coal mining union put out a statement asking Senator Manchin to reconsider his position. In it, they write, "We are disappointed that the bill will not pass and urge Manchin to work with his colleagues to pass something that will help coal miners working." Could statements like this one from such an influential group help change his mind?
It's possible. He's worked very closely with the United Mine Workers. He reached an agreement a couple years ago to resolve on a bipartisan basis a pension and health care crisis that was affecting coal miners. And Cecil Roberts has asked Manchin to reconsider his position. Roberts is the president of the United Mine Workers of America, and coal miners are a substantial constituency in West Virginia. And I think it's important to note that while Manchin said on Sunday that he does not not support the House-passed version of Build Back Better. He did have a conversation with President Biden, and they agreed to keep talking. So it's not quite clear yet whether or not how made up his mind truly is if Democrats go back to the drawing board and put this legislation back through committee and change the programs and the length of the programs to basically please Manchin and ensure that he can actually support the legislation. Manchin has also reiterated recently that he wants to see the tax code redone. And so there are elements in his statements in recent days that suggest that the door might not be completely closed. It seems like it's closed on the House-passed version, but in terms of what he might be able to support long term and what Democrats can get across the finish line in the new year remains to be seen.
So it's not dead in the water. There's still some tokens to negotiate with, it seems. Now, the Huffington Post reported that Manchin privately told some colleagues, I don't know if you came across this article or not, that he thought parents could use the monthly tax credit payments from the legislation on drugs instead of their children. Manchin's office has declined to comment on the story. What are you hearing about this report?
I mean, it seems like a lot of other outlets have confirmed those comments that Manchin made privately. I mean, Manchin has repeatedly expressed this last week that he has concerns with the child tax credit. Publicly, what he has said is that he basically does not want the child tax credit only extended for 1 year in the social spending bill. He has a lot of concerns about providing programs that aren't necessarily guaranteed to last long term. And so what he's basically said is that he wants to see the child tax credit extended, but that should essentially either be done permanently in the Build Back Better bill or taken completely out, and that some solution outside of the social spending bill can be found potentially with Republicans. That appears to be what his message is publicly, but in private, it appears that he also has other concerns about the way the child tax credit could be used.
Perhaps some kind of limitation would make him at peace. Marianne LeVine, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.